Hello everyone, this is the finale of What If Naruto Had to Prove Himself, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Naruto. On a basic level, he was a simple guy to read, uncomplicated goals, sigh, usually happy-go-lucky, but always stubborn as a mountain, guess which one, and about as tough. Still, if you went deeper to the point that matters, the worst thing about him was also the best thing. The guy was a bit of a nut. You couldn't ever be sure of what he was thinking. Usually he wasn't the cleverest shinobi around, but seemingly at random he'd come up with some profound thought or brilliant strategy, or completely miss something obvious. From an outsider's point of view, Naruto's thought process and problem solving was direct, blunt, and non-complex, but he was always the reliable sort. In the time that Shikamaru had known him, he'd come to think of the knucklehead as a shogi piece that acted erratically, or a pawn or knight that regularly got it into his head to go personally after the queen. Thing is, he usually had the guts, and recently the smarts, to pull it off. All in all, Naruto was not perfect. But then, to Shikamaru's knowledge, nobody was. It was the passion that made the difference. Naruto's constant drive to better himself and overcome his faults was something Shikamaru didn't see in too many people, certainly not himself, for example, and it's what convinced him the guy would be a good leader. The fox. Naruto had it well under control. It was just one other factor to consider during strategy. Shikamaru lazily finished penning the last line or two on the docent. He lolled his head up the road when he heard someone approaching. Smirking, he folded the page up and slipped it into a pocket. Well, looks like you're on a mission. Again resplendent in his formal shogun garb, Naruto smiled easily as he approached and sat on the next stool over. Yeah, and a dangerous one at that. I'm off to convince Hiashi Hyuga to let me marry his daughter. Across the counter, Chuki gave a low whistle. That does sound like a tough one, he joked. Tell you what, this one's on the house. Double order of the regular, coming up. Naruto's smile broadened. Thanks, old man, I appreciate it. Put it in takeout cups, would ya? Wouldn't do to be late. He spun in his seat and leaned back on the counter carefully, looking up at the sky. Shikamaru joined him. The day had begun clear, the rising sun shone brightly in the middle of a patch of crisp blue, but a curtain of ominous clouds was rolling in on the horizon. A storm was coming. The lazy ninja threw a glance sideways at Naruto. The other man gazed at the dark clouds intently, an undaunted look around his eyes and mouth. Shikamaru Street USD him a moment longer and snorted. Clean shaven, clothes washed and pressed, appearance immaculate, and all this early in the morning, you're really serious about this, aren't you? Naruto gave one short nod, expression unchanged. Heck yeah, I am. For Hinata's sake I'm going to try the polite and civil route, but when it all comes down to it, by the end of today Hiashi is either going to have a peace of mind about us or a peace of mine. I will not be turned back. Shikamaru shrugged. Well, I hate to start that day on a drag, but you won't. Naruto finally turned to smile at Shikamaru, complete confidence in his eyes. This time, I'm prepared. I've got you beat. Shikamaru quirked an eyebrow and a smirk tugged at his mouth. Oh yeah, let's hear it. What's one thing that will never let a shinobi down? Perseverance. His expression remained even. So did Shikamaru's. Never giving up. Keep fighting when you know you're outclassed and you'll get yourself ked. Naruto shook his head. No, not persistence. You're right, sometimes it's better to retreat from battles you can't win. Perseverance is the refusal to leave it at that, to push yourself to become stronger, smarter, better, whatever, until you can win those battles. Perseverance is the drive to improve, to never give up because something is too hard, and that will never let you down, shinobi or otherwise. The other man thought about it only a moment before nodding. All right, good point. Now it's your turn. Stump me. Naruto's smile twisted into a smirk of his own. Try this one on for size. I am an investment of brick and mortar. I'm not worth much now, but shaped and built I forge a village's future. I dictate its prosperity to come. What am I? He settled back into his seat with a look of satisfaction as he waited for the lazy ninja's answer. Shikamaru took his time. He looked up at the sky, focused on the oncoming clouds, and didn't speak or move. After a minute or two he closed his eyes, and Naruto knew he had entered the second stage of his thinking process. During this time, Tsuki finished Naruto's order and set the takeout cups on the counter. Taking it seriously now, Shikamaru bent forward and assumed his concentration pose, hands at stomach level, fingertips pressed together, palms up. Eventually he sat back up. A look of amused intrigue on his face, he shrugged in the other man's direction. Naruto's smirk expanded further. He raised his chin slightly and said, "Simple genin." Shikamaru considered that answer a moment. Then he shrugged again. "Good news, you're done with the trial by leaves. Bad news, that means we're back to work soon." Naruto mirrored the wry look on his face. "That last part's true, but my trials aren't quite done yet." He stood and scooped up the ramen cups, nodding thanks to the cook. Shikamaru snorted. "I wouldn't worry too much. Perseverance will never let a ninja down, right?" Naruto shot him one last cool look before heading off toward the Hyuga compound, in the direction of the gathering storm. Not long after, Choji wandered up and sat next to his teammate. "So," he began without preamble, "Naruto didn't really stump you, did he?" It was more statement of expectation than question. A sly smirk crept into existence. Maybe, maybe not. The point was to get him thinking outside the box, right? Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished indeed, observed Tsunade an hour later in her office. She street USD the completed report intently. "This is good work, Shikamaru." She shuffled through a few more pages. "Very good work. I appreciate the effort you put into this." Slouched in the chair across from her, the normally lazy ninja nodded. "It was a big drag, but I figured since it was my idea in the first place," he shrugged. Wasn't much different than grading papers at the academy. My sympathies. It was impossible to tell if the Hokage's tone was sarcastic or sincere. Next to her, Shizune cleared her tea. "So, what all do we have to work with?" Tonton oinked with interest from her lap. Never taking her eyes off the papers, Tsunade straightened and began slowly. Rock Lee can attest to Naruto's physical prowess, tactical sense, critical thinking, jutsu proficiency. Neji, Kiba and Tenten cover them all, so we have ample evidence to satisfy any reasonable expectation of SK. My test will show he's no genius, but he does have an unorthodox take on things. That sort of creativity is just as good in most cases. I'm definitely saving that riddle of his for academy classes, for example. He demonstrated leadership potential with Tenten as well, added Shizune, and Ino's and Shino's tests can support that. Tsunade nodded. He's still shaky on etiquette and rough with his manners. That will cost him points with some of them, but there's plenty of time for him to improve. She pursed her lips a moment, then nodded. Besides, if they can tolerate me, they can tolerate him. Shikamaru cleared his tea, drawing their attention. Nodding toward one paper in particular, he said, "Size there will be the big one for a lot of them. If Naruto can be put in such a bloodrage against someone openly antagonizing him and still keep the fox on a leash, nobody has any grounds to suggest he'll lose it on anyone from the Leaf Village. Sakura's and Choji's exams should prove that beyond a doubt," said Shizune. Choji's trial also doubles as a pole of village support. Naruto's enemies are growing fewer in number. The Hokage nodded. "That show of support is the most important thing. Shikamaru, did each of you complete your psyche evaluations?" Shikamaru inclined his head toward a small stack of papers neatly set off to the side. "Some of us got to the point quicker than others, but we all understood the point was to be objective." He shrugged. "Of course, some of us were better at that than others." Tsunade picked up the stack and glanced through it. She paused at one particular page and nodded thoughtfully. "We may have to throw out Hinata's opinion." The lazy ninja waved his hand. I'd keep it in. The few who are actually curious won't find a more familiar source. Given the circumstances, no one would believe her to be unbiased. We don't want to give the rest of them any sort of leverage to dismiss the whole thing, said Tsunade. The young man just shrugged. A curious look on her face, Shizune chimed in, "There's something I don't understand. Very few of the 11 ninja performing the trial by leaves have the training and experience to make that sort of assessment of character, especially if we're worried about bias. Wouldn't it be more effective to have older, More qualified shinobi evaluate him. But the Hokage shook her head. That would probably be more professional, but less effective. Most of the elders are sensible enough to realize they are selecting a leader primarily for their children, and perhaps grandchildren. That means the opinions of that age group carry a lot of influence. Shizune's eyebrows rose. Oh, I see. The Leaf 12 are respected as the best and brightest of the next generation. If Shikamaru appreciated the praise, he didn't show it beyond a quirked lip. The group on the whole is well loved throughout the village. Unanimous support among them for one of their number will not be easy to ignore. The lazy ninja surprised her then by snorting aloud, his smirk turning wry. You'd like to think so, wouldn't you? At the assistant's inquisitive look, Hokage and ninja shared a knowing glance. Never underestimate the ability of stubborn old men to be a drag, Shikamaru said frankly, as if that explained everything. Still confused, Shizune turned to her lady. We have enough evidence to convince those who are legitimately on the fence, Tsunade explained, but the problem is that we still don't have a majority. The kid's right, the elders can be incredibly stubborn, but especially in groups. The number that still actually hates Naruto has become much smaller than it was, but they still hold a great deal of influence, enough to hold most of the undecided against him. Shizune frowned. I see the problem. We should try to break up the Confederacy, then. Who else can we lure away? Shikamaru blew out a long sigh. That's exactly the problem. Tsunade was tight-lipped as she spoke. Due to a variety of circumstances, the clan with probably the most political clout happens to be the Hyuga. The other woman rocked back in her seat. And Naruto's trying to marry their heiress. The Hokage looked rueful. From all appearances, Hiashi has been remaining ambivalent so far during the deliberation, but he is without question the most influential figure on the council. Whichever way he swings will almost certainly turn the tide of the debate. Shizune nodded slowly as she realized the whole of the situation. Naruto's at the Hyuga compound right now to speak to Hiashi about his marriage to Hinata. The stakes are higher than he realizes. The Hyuga are proud, strong, and steeped in tradition, infamous grudge holders. If Naruto offends him, creates any sort of bad blood between them, the entire trial by leaves may be completely wasted, finished Shikamaru. Pretty much. He shrugged and lounged back, laying his head on his folded arms, and closed his eyes. We broke the long stalemate in the game and did everything we could to move the plan forward. Now it's all up to Naruto for the win. If he's not careful, he might very well get himself in checkmate. The first time she saw him, he'd been crying. She'd failed at practice again. Father had screamed at her again, but mother wasn't there to curb his temper anymore. Maybe that made him yell louder. Baby Hanabi had started crying, and while father had been distracted, Hinata ran. She ran out into the street, to find a safe place to leave her tears. Just when she collapsed behind a vacant stall to let everything out, that's when she saw him, a little blonde boy, no bigger than herself, curled up just inside the alley across the way. His face was buried in his knees, and his body shook with sobs. Alone, and so very lonely. She knew that feeling, she knew it so well. She wanted to go and sit with him and cry with him, if only so neither of them would have to alone. She didn't though, because then 3 other boys turned the corner and called to him. These were not friends. He flinched at their voices. They surrounded him, kicked at him. She could hear them calling him names. They picked him up and shoved him around. Eventually he fell onto his hands and knees into the street. She wanted so badly to run to him, to make them stop hurting him, but she couldn't. His body was trembling as he pushed himself off the ground. Then suddenly, it stopped. He raised his head right in her direction. He didn't see her hidden by the stall, but she saw him. Something changed behind his big blue eyes, and his quivering lip grew still. No more tears poured down the streaks on his face. 2 of the other boys picked him off the ground and turned him around, and the third gave him another shove. He stumbled, nearly fell, but caught himself and marched right back up to the bully. He said nothing, did nothing, just stood there looking him in the eye. Confusion crossed the other boy's face. He shoved the little blonde boy again, who stumbled less this time and came right back again. He and his friends grew angry then, yelling at him and hitting him and pushing him harder, but every time, without a word or an ounce of resistance, the little blonde boy just picked himself up and faced them again. Eventually they grew tired of their sport and wandered away. As he watched them go, he wiped his nose once decisively, turned, and walked the other way. She crept out of the stall to follow him with her eyes in amazement. That's when Uncle Hisashi caught her. He scooped her off the ground and lectured her politely not to wander off by herself, staring at her with his pale, cold eyes. Uncle Hisashi didn't like her, she could tell. No one did. The whole world hated her, except, she looked over his shoulder at the little blonde head disappearing down the street. It was then that she decided they were meant to be friends. She wanted to tell him then, but she couldn't. The first rays of sunlight crept into Hinata Hyuga's bedroom and found her sitting at her desk. The raven-haired woman turned watered eyes out her window. It was not the light of dawn that had found her, for the sun had risen over the horizon some time ago, but it had risen behind angry clouds. Even now the sun's radiant face only peered through a gap in the gathering gloom. Its feeble rays conveyed none of its warmth, and it would disappear entirely again soon. Hinata extinguished the 2 candles that had made poor substitute and stood. She paused and looked again at the photograph by her open diary. It was a picture taken of herself and Naruto embracing, totally at ease, during that wonderful night under the stars. She brushed a hand once more against those faces that looked so happy, before silently moving to dress and prepare. The next time she saw him it was their first day at the academy. She didn't know how she convinced father to let her come, but as soon as he dropped her off she began looking for that boy. Class hadn't let in yet and all the kids were out in the front yard. Careful not to let anyone notice her, she searched through each crowd, but to her dismay he wasn't there. Her 6-year-old heart sank as she realized he may not even want to be a shinobi. She had no reason to think he'd be there in the first place. And then, suddenly, there he was, a flash of blonde dashing around the corner of the building, and plowing right into her. She gave a squeak of surprise as they both tumbled to the ground. He was back on his feet in a flash, a flustered look on his face. Oh, sorry, hey, are you okay? Are you all right? Her voice caught, and she was unsure how to respond. Why was that such an unfamiliar question? Honey, are you okay? Is everything all right? Wasn't it mother who said that last? She looked up at the boy in confusion. She hadn't even told him they were friends yet. Did he really care about her that much already? Perplexed at her silence, the boy looked around frantically until he caught sight of something growing at the base of the wall next to them. He plucked the plant and thrust it at her, saying, "Here girls like flowers, don't they?" It wasn't much of a flower really, just a dandelion, but its full yellow bloom looked so much like his wild blonde head she had to giggle. He began to relax. Then from somewhere around the corner an adult voice screamed, "Naruto-hhh." The boy tensed again. Whoops. Gotta go see ya. He flashed her a grin that was almost too big for him as he dashed past her. A man with a scar across his nose came around the corner, saw him and took off after him. Hinata looked down at the dandelion in her hand. Naruto, so that was his name. That was the day that Naruto had charmed her. But she couldn't tell him, because her voice had not returned. The wind howled as Naruto passed through the gates to the Hyuga compound, ruffling his hair and fluttering the loose folds of his attire. Having already disposed of the ramen cups from breakfast, he gave himself a last once-over as he stopped before the door. Satisfied, he looked back at the building before him. The face of the Hyuga compound loomed over him, large, grand, and proud. Maybe it was a trick of the light, but Naruto thought he could almost see Hiyashi's frowning face glaring down on him, just as the darkened sky overhead rumbled menacingly. He grimaced, hoping that wasn't a bad omen as he reached for the door. 1 month into the school year, Hinata still felt alone. As the closely guarded Hyuga heiress, she hadn't known any kids her own age her whole life except maybe cousin Neji. She wished she could make friends, but it was too hard to look around and not see father's disapproving look or her branch relatives' distant faces. Her grades had begun to show that they would suffer from her distraction. Father was already growing unsatisfied. She would have given up and returned to homeschooling if it weren't for Naruto. The prospect of having even one friend like him was something she'd wanted for just too long. So there she stayed. One morning she'd excused herself to go to the bathroom, as she often did when it had been particularly suffocating. On her way back she didn't notice a sign and slipped on wet floor, bumping a mop leaning against the wall. The mop fell over and tapped a trophy on a shelf, and like a series of dominoes more or more memorabilia across the shelf toppled, until the heavy bust at the end fell off the shelf entirely, slamming into the life-size statue of the third Hokage on loan to the academy. Hinata drew her hands to her mouth in a horrified gasp. The statue's base, already cracked and in need of repair, gave way entirely and the entire thing collapsed, sinking the third's head into the floor and shattering his body into pieces. Hinata felt like she might go to pieces too. The statue was very important. The teachers had made it very clear to the kids not to touch it. And she broke it. Father would be furious with her, or worse, he would tell her how ashamed he was, how embarrassed. He'd pull her out of the academy, and then she'd never get to see. Suddenly a classroom door flung open and Naruto himself darted through, jeering back over his shoulder. He stopped short and his eyes widened when he saw the carnage in the hall, wider yet when he spotted her. She did burst into tears then. Of all people to catch her, why did it have to be him? The teacher came out after him. Naruto, get back to your what? The thirds, what happened? Hinata flinched at the words. Then something strange happened. Naruto, who had been curiously studying her, spun toward the teacher and put on a cheeky smile. Or, what's the big deal? It needed fixing anyway, now it's just broke all over. It's a dumb statue anyway. I did everyone a favor. Hinata was dumbstruck. What was he? Why was he? The teacher's face turned 7 different shades of red. That's it, you little monster. You were really going to catch it this time. He seized the boy's arm and marched him off down the hall. As they passed Hinata, she saw Naruto pause his squirming and protesting to wink at her, as if telling her that everything was okay. That was when she began to truly admire him. But she still couldn't tell him. It was Hinata who greeted him. To his disappointment, she was not wearing her dress that complemented his own outfit but was instead clad in her traditional Hyuga robes. Still, Naruto recognized the need to appease her father, so he let it go without comment. She looked relieved to see him, but he could see her entire frame was tense with anxiety. Without a word he put his arms around her and drew her mouth to his. Her lips trembled at first, but like a gap opened in an overfilled balloon he felt some of the nervousness drain out of her. When they parted again, he was careful to wear a strong face for both of them. She smiled then, a small, shaky thing but a smile nonetheless, before leading him further inside. For the longest time after that, Hinata hadn't known whether to be glad or sad that she was so good at being invisible. On the one hand it was a blessing, because like her Naruto only let himself really be himself when he thought he was alone. She got to see the true side of him that she was sure no one else alive knew. She watched him try and fail in class and turn his failure into a prank, a joke. And then she watched him go off by himself after class and really try, and fail, and try some more. She watched him snore in front of the teacher, and work himself to utter exhaustion when he thought no one could see him. She saw the mocking grin he wore in public replaced with that strange look in his eye that had appeared the first time she saw him, when his tears had ceased. She decided that look was resolve. Why was he resolved? She thought she knew. She heard the things the other kids, the adults, even said about him. Whether they said it to his face or when they thought he was out of earshot, he heard them often enough too. Every time, she saw his jaw flinch so slightly anyone else would have missed it. But then he would smirk or stick his tongue out like it didn't bother him. One time during their secret hours she heard him say between heavy breaths, "Let them think what they want," before getting up and throwing his all into practice again. She thought she understood then, what people said didn't matter, because he knew he was worth more, and he worked to prove it to them. This was a profound revelation for Hinata. The two of them were so similar she wondered if the same could be true for her. She set her mind to it, and it was an instant relief. She was still shy and soft-spoken, and she had trouble finding the self-worth Naruto held so easily, but merely setting that goal in mind, believing that one day she would show everyone she was special, was enough to fill a void in her life. The progress might be slow and painful, but as long as he could bear it, so could she. Yes, being invisible was, at times, a blessing. On the other hand, it was also a curse, because Naruto still didn't see her. He didn't know they were friends, so alike and not alone. He didn't know how much she admired him, how he was changing her life. And she still couldn't tell him. They greeted Hiyashi in his Orzen's room, a stark and sparse chamber, with few furnishings except the mats on which they all knelt and the grand ornate tapestry bearing the Hyuga crest hung on the wall behind the clan head. As one of the pensioners, Hinata knelt next to Naruto across from her father. It was expected that everyone had already eaten, but custom dictated that drinks be set out and enjoyed together before the meeting could begin. Usually it was the lady of the house that prepared and served the refreshment. Hinata herself had served in that capacity several times. Given her position today, of course, Hanabi took her place, silently pouring the tea before leaving them to their privacy. The custom was meant in the spirit of hospitality, but there was none in the atmosphere this day. Naruto tried 2 or 3 times to strike up conversation with Hiashi, but the Hyuga offered only terse replies in clipped tones, keeping his face entirely impassive as his off-white eyes bored into the younger man. Eventually giving up the idea of dialogue, Naruto let him stare, setting his chin and gazing resolutely in return. The 3 of them sipped their tea in stifling silence. She couldn't win. She wasn't good enough yet. It was the first time she truly had Naruto's attention, and she failed. As she lost consciousness from Neji's injuries at that first Chunin exam, Hinata had glimpsed Naruto standing over her and prayed that he would think highly of her effort, or at least that he would begin to see the change that he had inspired in her. Shino had visited her in the hospital and told her what Naruto had done after she passed out. It stunned her. The best she'd been hoping for was confirmation of the concern she thought she'd seen in the blonde boy's face. That he'd sworn such a personal oath on her behalf, to her knowledge he'd never done anything like that before. It felt like he was acting as her own private champion. The thought sent a burst of unexplainable emotion through her, and it made her wonder. As soon as she was well enough she'd begun making regular TSS to the places where she'd watched Naruto from the shadows, to consider things seen, heard, and done. On the day of the final exam, to her surprise and quite by accident, or perhaps it was fate, she'd met him there. He'd shocked her to admit he was faltering, displaying a doubt in himself she'd thought he'd left far behind. She realized that once again she was seeing a deep part of him he never showed anyone else. Even flattered that he saw fit to confide in her as she was, a need to restore his confidence overtook her, and all in a rush she found herself telling him exactly how she felt. At least, in part. She told him all the good qualities she knew he had and everything she admired about him. The rest of her feelings, though, fluttered about in such chaos she couldn't even make sense of them, let alone set them to words. Not that she needed to. He remembered himself and perked up right away. What Naruto said to her then at that place, sent a fresh wave of that unknown warmth through Hinata and made her wonder even further. Not long afterward she watched his fight with Neji. She saw the world beating down on him through her cousin, and saw him buck the world's contempt in return. She knew he fought to prove himself, but she saw his fist held solemnly straight out in front of his chest and knew he fought for her as well. That was the day she knew for certain, she would love him until the day she SD and beyond. But she certainly couldn't tell him that. Hinata listened absently as Naruto began the proper introduction, acknowledgement of tradition, sites of respect, and the like. She knew the words by heart, and he'd practiced them enough she was sure he knew the right things to say. Her attention wandered, and she heard the patter of rain begin to tap against the roof. As the routine words droned on, the tapping grew loud and impatient, as if the rain shared her anxious anticipation. Naruto must have felt it too. He was growing frustrated though he struggled not to show it, and she could tell it was becoming an effort to force himself to slow down and remember everything. The sliding door rattled as the wind flew in through one of the gardens and tore down the open hallway. Hinata hoped for the sake of her health that Hanabi was not trying to eavesdrop. Warmth seemed to leach out of the room, leaving a faint but noticeable chill in the air. It was a foul day indeed. Over the years there arose several missions and circumstances that placed the two of them together, and every time they did she was eager to show Naruto how closely she followed his path and his Nendo. For the most part, though, Hinata had contented herself to remain invisible, letting her love and her admiration grow in silence. She watched him become a man and continued to notice the things everyone else missed. She watched him play pranks on his friends, but she also saw the look of concern on his face whenever he overheard one of their troubles. She watched him brag along with the rest about the missions he'd completed and the foes he'd beaten, but she noticed he took much more pride in the friends he'd made along the way than the KS he'd made as a shinobi. Over time she decided that was the true source of his resolve. He worked to prove himself, not in skill but compassion. He fought not to win but to protect. He considered all life precious and worth standing up for. He'd become the hero his father hoped he would be. She decided that the day she learned about the fox. To care so much even under such a burden took more heart than she thought any other man possessed, and it was such a heart she'd come to adore. Maybe she idealized him. Maybe even he didn't see half of these things in himself, but she did see them, and it didn't take her Byakugan to do it. If only she could muster the courage to tell him how she felt, but how could she, when he was so amazing and she still struggled to find her own worth? And then one day less than 2 months ago, quite out of the blue she found she didn't have to anymore, as if fate had intervened, her own diary had flown to him and conveyed her feelings, and he had found his way to her, returning them with his own. The first kiss they shared that day had baffled her, because it meant he had seen something in her that she had missed. The second had banished the thought from her mind. Since then she had lived in the present, and the present was a dream come true. Eventually she worried about what would happen when the dream ended, but it was then the dream perfected itself. She wore his ring on her finger, and she wondered how the present could get any better. Like waking from a dream, however, Hinata found her eyes opened. She looked to the future, and her heart sank. Naruto would be Hokage someday, there could be no lesser future for him. Could she be a Hokage's wife? No, he would need a woman who was strong, confident and wise at his side. Even if she thought she could become that woman, Hinata was not unaware of politics. She knew the danger to his position she put him in, and she knew she could not be so selfish as to cost him the future he deserved. As much as she loved him and as much as he would hate himself for it, if the choice came down to being with her or fulfilling his dreams, they would each have to reconcile themselves to the choice he would have to make. Because she couldn't tell him. Naruto paused in his litany and blew out an irritated sigh. Rather than pick up where he'd left off, he said, "Look, with all due respect Lord Hyuga, we're all aware of each other's position here. Rather than waste breath repeating what everyone already knows, can we skip all the formality and speak frankly?" Hinata drew in a gasp beside him, causing him to wince, but Hiashi surprised them both when he gave a short nod and said, "By all means." Naruto blinked twice. "Ah, well, thank you." He took a deep breath to steady himself. "Okay, I'm here to ask for Hinata's hand in marriage." "A bit late, it would seem," replied the older man sourly, inclining his head ever so slightly toward his daughter. Hinata jerked and nearly covered her hand with her other, but caught herself and endured, turning crimson in embarrassment. Naruto felt his own face heating up as well. He'd forgotten they were both still wearing their engagement rings. He realized then that Hinata had probably never taken hers off, and suddenly wondered how long Hiashi had known. He coughed. "That was my mistake. It's not an excuse, but since I have no family of my own I'm not used to these sorts of traditions. I didn't mean to undermine your authority, and I beg you to overlook any offense it may have caused." His pride nearly made the word, beg, stick in his tea, but he powered on past it. "Will you see fit to grant our request regardless? What makes you think I will even consider it?" challenged Hiashi evenly. "Ignorant as you are of tradition, even you must know that the Hyuga do not marry outside the clan." "Every tradition has exceptions," retorted Naruto. A hint of a cool smile tugged at his lip. "I haven't heard any objections raised about Neji's engagement to Tenten, for example." That seemed to catch the clan head off guard for half an instant. "What the branch family chooses to allow is entirely irrelevant," he answered hotly. A thunderclap boomed outside. "They and their fallacies have no place in this discussion. The bloodline of the main house must remain pure." Naruto felt a flash of anger on Neji's behalf, but he tamped it down. "But let us forget that for the moment," continued Hiashi, stroking his chin as if in thought. "Let us assume what you say is possible. Why should I make such an exception for you, Naruto Uzumaki? What merits do you possess to deserve it? Do you offer my daughter a comfortable home to live in?" Naruto thought of his cramped apartment and felt his cheeks flush. "Number." Hiashi nodded and continued to regard him evenly. "Do you offer a stable and significant income, to assure that her needs are met?" "No. A supportive family then, to care for her while you are away." The younger man's jaw clenched. "You know as well as I do that I don't," he ground out. Hiashi inclined his head. "Indeed. I also know that you cannot even offer a name in high standing throughout the village. Many still consider it quite the opposite, in fact. Naruto's fingers dug into his knees as he struggled not to throw back a vicious retort. He felt Hinata surreptitiously brush his hand, and the action cooled his head somewhat. Letting some of the tension drain from his body, he looked Hiashi defiantly in the eye and said, "I offer her love." Hiashi made a noise somewhere between a chuckle and a disdainful snort. "That is an empty offer. Any of dozens of other would-be suitors would claim the same, many far better off than you elsewise." "Father, be silent, Hinata," Hiashi scolded harshly. "It is not your place to speak here." This time Naruto very nearly jumped to his feet. "Hey, first of all, don't speak to her like that. Second, I love Hinata, not her title or her money, and I will not have you dismiss that like it's some kind of joke. Why is that not good enough for you?" Hiyashi's face remained expressionless, but his voice was cold and quiet as he spoke. The pounding rain sounded impossibly loud, but his words cut through like a knife. "This is my home. You have come here seeking my favor. Do not forget that, boy. How I choose to speak here, especially concerning my own daughter, is my decision alone. Now, even if what you say is true, love is not necessarily enduring, it is called a fleeting emotion for a reason." Naruto stiffened. "You call it strong now, but a year from now. 5 years. 10. If your fancy changes. Never. It'll never happen. Then my daughter will be left with nothing. In the quite possible event that US is a shinobi, she will also be left with nothing. Is this not correct? Not as possible as you'd like to think," thought Naruto indignantly. He turned to Hinata, and paused. Her face had turned ashen, as if merely the thought of it made her sick. She tried to shake it off when she saw him looking, but he hesitated before saying, "I don't want to hurt her." He shook his head. "But don't think even for a moment that I will abandon her, in death or otherwise." A small quirk of the lip that resembled a chagrined smirk cracked Hiyashi's impassive mask. Noble sentiments from one who is still very young. In reality, however, you offer nothing but an avenue that must inevitably end in pain for at least one of you. His gaze lowered ever so slightly and he grew quiet. Naruto sensed a breach in the older man's emotional armor, but before he could say anything Hiyashi's eyes rose and the gap slammed shut again. "I have entertained this debate long enough. The heir or heiress of the main house marries within the clan. No exceptions, and certainly not for the likes of you. Naruto Uzumaki, I deny your suit." Out of the corner of his eye Naruto saw Hinata wilt at those words. He himself felt a measure of disappointment, but it was quickly replaced with grim determination. He'd anticipated such a result. The storm outside lulled as he raised his chin and said, "I'd hoped it wouldn't come to this, Lord Hyuga." He reached over and took Hinata's hand. Her father raised an eyebrow, "But I've proposed marriage to Hinata, and she has accepted. Under Leaf Village law which supersedes clan traditions, that's all we need. We both want your approval, but we will marry without it if we have to. There is nothing you can do to drive us apart. Knowing that, will you at least consent to give us your blessing? Can you at least do that for your daughter?" Hiyashi's eyes narrowed. "Marry without my approval. Will you now?" A cold, thin smile twisted his lip. "Are you certain there is nothing I can do? If your mutual consent is all you need, it seems all I need do is persuade you not to consent." Now it was Naruto's turn to snort derisively, but it was half-hearted. He didn't like that look. "Good luck." The older man nodded graciously as if accepting the challenge and seemed to gather his thoughts. With the Uchiha clan gone, he began, Naruto's expression already darkening, "We the Hyuga are left virtually undisputed as the Leaf Village's strongest clan. We possess the most potent and the most closely guarded bloodline, we provide the village with some of its most scared shinobi," his smirk turned smug, "and accordingly, we have the greatest political influence." Naruto didn't know what Hiyashi was playing at, but the mere involvement of politics was making him uneasy. "Get to the point, please," he said gruffly. "In due time, young Master Uzumaki." The older man's tone was just polite enough to avoid being overtly mocking. He half turned and waved expansively at the banner behind him. "Now, as I was saying, the Hyuga are taken very seriously, and as the head of my clan my voice carries a great deal of weight in many places." He turned back to look Naruto in the eye. "Places like the Council of Elders, for example. Issues like the selection of our new leader." Naruto stiffened. "What are you getting at?" he asked, quiet and serious. For a candidate to be accepted as Hokage, both his predecessor and the Council of Elders must be in concurrence over his sufficiency. For the council to be in agreement, a specific majority of opinion must be reached. I have not said a great deal on the matter as of yet, but be assured that once I do, a significant number will follow my lead. Hiyashi's expression softened and his tone became amiable, though the hint of a smirk remained. You are a very capable shinobi, Uzumaki. I would be more than amenable to back you. However, the Hokage must also be an individual who respects the traditions of the clans. It would be unfortunate, his eye gleamed as he said the word, if the Hyuga had to oppose you for disregarding ours. Keep your bribes and your threats, the younger man said disgustedly. I will become Hokage without your help. Oh, challenged Hiyashi. A trace of contemptuous superiority crept into his voice as he continued, you say we are all aware of each other's position, but I do not think you are aware of your own. The council is divided about you, Uzumaki, much too evenly. There is a chance you could yet succeed and win the nomination, but that chance will less if I lead the Hyuga against you. The undecided will follow me, and your supporters will disappear. Tsunade cannot win the ears of the elders she so readily antagonizes and belittles. I, on the other hand, thoroughly understand the intricacies and nuances of the council and how to manipulate them. Do not doubt what I say, boy, I am a master in this arena. I see my insinuations go over your head, however, so let me skip all the formality and speak frankly. Hiyashi leaned forward slightly, looked Naruto in the eye, and spoke each word deliberately. You will release my daughter from your engagement, or you will never be Hokage. He leaned back again, crossed his arms and looked self-satisfied. The wind rattled the door again. Naruto felt as if he'd been struck with a hammer. He turned to Hinata. Her head drooped forward and her face was hidden behind a curtain of her hair. Her whole body quavered. She was clearly fighting tears, but it didn't seem that she was surprised by her father's ultimatum. They must have already had this conversation, he realized. That's what's been bothering her all this time. She knew it would come down to this, and she thinks I'll pick, what? What would he choose? His heart screamed to stand up for Hinata, but the prospect of never being Hokage seemed to clutch at his lungs and make him short of breath. Suddenly Shino's words about regret made perfect sense. He stared down at the floor, at his hands resting on his knees. He'd only ever failed a promise once before, and he knew the weight it had cast on his shoulders. The guilt over Sasuke's death only confronted him occasionally by now, but this, no matter what he decided, he would face his choice every day of the rest of his life. He felt sick as he remembered all the sweet things he'd promised the wonderful woman beside him, and his heart felt as if it would stop and never restart when he tried to picture her face if he closed his eyes. Unbidden, the faces of every person to whom he'd swore he would be Hokage someday paraded in front of him, too numerous to count. He saw the frustration on Tsunade's face, and that so familiar look of disappointment on Iruka-sensei's, burned into his memory from the academy. He saw the third, looking old and tired and sad, and after him the fourth. He snapped his eyes open again before he could see the expression his father wore. His breathing came in ragged rasps. His right hand curled into a trembling fist and thumped the ground. Months of bliss competed with years of dreaming. Hinata had been mistreated and tossed aside her whole life. Naruto knew what that was like, and so he knew with painful clarity how it would feel if he abandoned her now. On the other hand, if he became Hokage first, Hiyashi would no longer have any leverage over them. It wouldn't be forever, and if he explained himself to her. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a single tear fall from her face. He gritted his teeth as he made his decision. Fine, he said softly. His trembling fist grew still and opened. Have it your way. Hinata drooped further. Naruto slammed his palm against the ground. Eyes blazing, his head whipped up and he declared, I will never be Hokage. The smug look on Hiyashi's face disappeared. Anger crept into Naruto's voice, partially out of disgust, and partially from frustration at himself. And you know what? I don't need to be. That's the problem with you pompous, self-righteous nobles. You all think Hokage is just a TLE, a rank you can use to control everyone. Well, I got news for you, Lord Hyuga, you couldn't be more wrong. The Hokage do have a commitment to the village, but they also have a commitment to its people, and that's what sets them apart. He slashed a hand through the air. They're not chosen by birth or wealth or standing. They don't even have to be the strongest. They are chosen for their heart. They have a passion to protect each individual, not just the whole. The Hokage is a man that pushes himself to the limit so everyone else can be happy. He respects the wishes of the clans, but he's also ready to listen to the smallest civilian child, and he holds the right thing to do above the law, something I don't expect you to know anything about. The people don't follow the Hokage because he's their ruler, they follow him because they know he'll spend his life working for them, and even be the first to lay it down if he has to. And you know what? It doesn't take rank to do that. I aspire to be Hokage because that's where I can do the most. He almost faltered for a moment, but his eyes hardened and he proudly drew himself up to his full height. But if I have to stay a Jonin, then I will serve as a Jonin. If I join Anbu, I will serve as an Anbu. If I'm assigned to the academy, I will give my all for the village there. If you and your council STS me of rank all the way down to Genin and beyond, I will still protect you and everyone else with the best of my ability. If I must be Hokage in all but name, I can do that. He ignored Hyashi's hard stare and continued, softer than before. What I can't do, is abandon Hinata. She's shy, overly modest and much too quick to doubt herself, but she has the kindest heart I've ever seen and I wouldn't change it for the world. I love your daughter, Hyashi, and nothing will ever change that. So if you tell me I have to choose between her and some empty TLE, well, that's no choice at all. He thrust his right fist, fingers down, straight out in front him toward his future-in-law. Love is all I have to offer, but I offer it all to her and her alone. I swear to you, for the rest of my life I will give her all the attention, devotion and affection that you have denied her. Believe it. Hyashi said nothing for a long handful of moments, but only stared. Naruto was entirely unfazed, determined to hold his gaze as long as he needed to. When the older man finally did speak, his words were hard and clipped. If I were you, young Uzumaki, I would watch my tone when speaking to your elders in the future. A hint of a smirk softened his expression. But apart from that, it is a very bold stance you take. You may consider your trial by leaves effectively finished, now that you have passed my test of commitment. Naruto froze. Come again. The clan head of the Hyuga actually chuckled. Be careful with your generalizations, Naruto. I am not as self-righteous as you think. I know I have not been a perfect father to Hinata nor Hanabi, for that matter. In the past I have been so absorbed in my responsibility as head of my clan that I did not see the damage I was doing my own family. Without ever intending to, I pled my daughter's development and kindled the hatred of my dear brother's son. Imagine my surprise, then, when I found the same loudmouthed, clanless young ninja addressed both problems right under my nose. You offset Neji's hate with hope. You gave Hinata someone to strive for and praise for her growth, which I with my disappointed expectations was never able to offer. Without you, Naruto, I never would have suspected that the damage was my fault, let alone that I could begin to repair it. I would be a fool not to be eternally grateful. At this, Hyashi bowed in formal respect before the younger shinobi. Naruto's fist had long since dropped to his side, and he knelt motionless in gape-mouthed silence. The clan head straightened with a sincere smile. The truth is that I was delighted when you began to court Hinata, for I could think of no one better for her hand. Then his expression turned more serious. And yet, despite all appearances, I do care for her. Toward that end, I deceived you today because I had to be sure. I have been watching you, Naruto. I was not lying when I said I believe you could be a quite capable Hokage. All of what you said is true, but I had to be certain that you believed it, that you understood all of its deeper implications, and that you would not repeat my mistake of holding duty above loved ones. When Hinata revealed your engagement 3 days ago, I knew it was a perfect opportunity. I told her of my plan, and as my last selfish command as her father, I forbade her from speaking of it. Naruto was still having trouble finding his voice. I don't know what to say. Hyashi bowed again. I offer my humblest apologies for testing you so, Naruto Uzumaki, but know that you have met my greatest expectations. So, began Naruto slowly, does that mean you are giving us your permission to marry? My permission, my blessing, and my support in your bid for the name Hokage, if you are agreeable. Are you joking? Exclaimed Naruto, barely able to contain his excitement. Of course I mean, he composed himself and inclined his head, I am pleased to accept, Lord Hyuga. He bit his lip, and continued, and I apologize for my rudeness. Hyashi smirked. Others might have taken offense at such a tongue lashing, but I know your speech betrays your passion. Do not concern yourself, but be more cautious in the future. He extended a hand, which Naruto eagerly accepted, and they shook. Now then, you will have to return here tomorrow so the ceremony formally naming Hanabi the Hyuga heiress can. Hey, wait a minute, Naruto yelled angrily. I thought you said you weren't going to mistreat Hinata anymore, but the first thing you're going to do is take away her birthright. The clan head regarded him patiently. She cannot be the head of two clans, Naruto. If she is going to help lead the Uzumaki clan, she must relinquish her place with the Hyuga. Naruto felt his cheeks turning scarlet, and he shrank in embarrassment. Oh, then he remembered something and shook himself. Wait, what about your caged bird seal? If you guys are thinking about it, you can forget it, because I won't let it anywhere near her or our K-kids. Hiashi nodded. I anticipated your protest, and believe me, I do not wish it on her either. After much thought, I think I have devised a solution for both of us. He paused, and when Naruto motioned for him to continue, he mused, did you know that, according to legend, the Uchiha clan was descended from the Hyuga clan? Naruto shook his head in surprise. Supposedly, the Sharingan was the result of the one time a main family Hyuga married outside the clan, to an individual possessed of very unique chakra. It was the Sharingan that led the Uchiha to become one of the most vital clans in the Leaf Village, both politically and in terms of strength. But now, the Uchiha are gone. The Hyuga have eagerly stepped into the void they left behind, but I am not so blind as to hold my clan's social standing above the welfare of the village. A canny gleam entered his eye. The leaf has been weakened. I propose to mend this, by creating another bloodline, another Keka Genkai. After all, there is already a main family Hyuga preparing to wed outside the clan, and you, Naruto, certainly possess a unique chakra. I will declare your marriage an experiment, and we will not interfere. Naruto let it all sink in for a moment. Thank you. You're really sticking your N out for us, aren't you? Sometimes we must hold the right thing to do above the law, responded Hiashi calmly. Amusement crossed his face, and he gestured. Presently, the right thing to do is attend to my daughter. Naruto finally turned to his left, where Hinata had sat rigidly upright, mouth open and eyes wide, in rosy stunned breathlessness since his first declaration. Naruto leaned toward her, concerned. She followed him with her eyes, but she wasn't saying anything. Hinata. Hey Hinata, are you alright? He chose me. He chose me. Me. He chose 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 me. Chose me. Chose me. Heckos 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 me. Me. He chose me. He chose me. Me. He chose me. Hinata. Hey Hinata, are you alright? Thump. As her eyes began to flutter open, she heard the most wonderful man in the world say, hey, good morning, sunshine. Hey, you know you really need to give me more warning when you're going to faint like that. She stopped to let his voice ring in her ears. Then she frowned and opened her eyes fully. I don't understand, she said. Why did you pick me? Your dream, you could have lost, and I'm just. As the fuzzy blonde shape over her came into focus, she saw an expression split between exasperation and simple adoration. Why are you so convinced that you don't deserve a happy ending? He sighed. Didn't I tell you? You're more important to me than anything. You are my dream, Hinata, and I'll never give you up, no matter what. If you have so much trouble seeing the worth in yourself, then just believe in the worth that I see, okay? 'Cause I see more than enough. The wind tousled his hair, and he glanced up at the sky. She realized they were outside in the garden. The rain had stopped and the clouds, no longer dark, were beginning to break overhead. The storm was over. The sun shone through and painted his face with warmth, its rays captured and reflected in his golden hair like a prism. At that moment, everything she had ever felt about him, her secret thoughts and dreams and feelings, rose to her lips all at once. And this time, she found she could tell him everything. Sunad laid the small stack of papers on her desk and allowed herself a small satisfied smile. She'd read the report before, of course, but the ninja to whom it pertained was scheduled to return today. The doors to her office slammed open with a bang. Tsunade glanced up casually and mused, "Speak of the sun and it will shine. Welcome back, Naruto." The tall, blonde, not quite so obnoxious 20-year-old in the doorway chuckled. "The pervy sage is right," he joked as he strode forward. "You hardly ever jump anymore." He came to stand casually opposite her desk. "Naruto Uzumaki, reporting from duty." Tsunade nodded and gestured for him to take a seat. "I've been expecting you. I trust your mission went well." Her tone was formal, her official voice, but her canny smile belied the professionalism. Naruto mirrored her expression and winked as if acknowledging some unspoken secret between them. "You might say that. Remind me again of the details," she asked, more invitation than request. A look of amusement crossed his face. "Well, I got married a couple months back, you know." "Indeed." She nodded sagely. "Quite the spectacle, if I recall." He chuckled again. "Yeah, I was pretty surprised myself. Anyway, our friend Queen Kiyuki of the Land of Snow was there, and when she heard we weren't going to have time for a proper honeymoon. No rest for the demands of a shinobi. She mentioned that she just happened to be opening a new resort to take advantage of the country's springtime." He schooled his face into serious lines, but the mischief didn't leave his eyes. "Security was good," she said, but she wasn't sure it was good enough. She'd feel ever so much better if a couple ninja would attend in secret and stay the first month or two disguised as a young married couple perhaps. "Yes, I remember now. How convenient that I had just the young couple to recommend," the Hokage said straight-faced. She even offered to cover their stay in full as payment. She watched the corner of his mouth curl upward. "Well, Hinata and I may have let ourselves be talked into it. For the sake of bringing our two nations closer, of course." "Of course," Tsunade acknowledged coolly. She planted her elbows on her desk and propped her chin on her hands. "Please, continue with the details." "Well, there was an opening ceremony that everyone thought was boring, at least until the fireworks at the end. After that we patrolled the park for a while, until Kiyuki asked us to investigate something suspicious at the ritziest hotel in town. Found the place, checked it out, found nothing, checked in just to be sure." Naruto lounged back in his chair, closed his eyes and smiled at the memories. "The next day there was a carnival where we inspected the rides for safety. The day after that we pursued rumors of shady characters at the water park, performed surveillance at the spa." He chuckled. "I swear, by the time we left we must have been everywhere in that whole resort and city, seen and done everything twice and never found anything more than a pickpocket and the occasional conman." "How strange," Tsunade said with mock surprise. "It almost makes one wonder where these insubstantial reports were coming from." Naruto opened his eyes and gave her a coy look. "Well, you know how quickly rumors travel. They could come from anywhere, from the queen herself, for all we knew." She nodded and spoke matter-of-factly. "Well, in any case, I'm sure she appreciated your efforts at keeping the peace." "Well done." She straightened and let her mouth twist into a smirk. "Now then, a couple important happenings occurred during your absence that you should know about. First, I assume that by now you are aware of the new clan complex constructed under the name Uzumaki." An impish look crossed Naruto's face as he said, "I just came from there. I think the builders wanted to remain anonymous, but Zano hadn't quite finished painting by the time we got there. Hinata was so excited that I volunteered to come report for both of us and left her there to start settling in." He leveled a cool look in her direction. "And before you say it, yes, I've heard that Choji and Tanbei are engaged." Tsunade arched her eyebrow at him, though her smirk remained amused. "You and Hinata seem to have set off a spree of such engagements. There have been 3 weddings in as many recent weeks and a half dozen or so more scheduled within the next month, and none of that is counting civilians. Shikamaru and Ino have mysteriously vanished for about 3 weeks, according to Choji." The blonde man grinned. "I was wondering why they weren't there to greet us." The Hokage nodded, then waved dismissively. "But that's another matter. More important is what I have here," she said, feeling her eagerness well up as she indicated the small stack of papers on her desk. He sat up, his curiosity piqued. "This is the latest consensus from the Council of Elders." She watched him carefully as she spoke, anticipating his reaction and trying not to show it. "They have reached the required majority, nearly unanimous, in fact. You, Naruto Uzumaki, are now my named successor to the title of Hokage. To her great surprise, Naruto did not whoop or cheer. His smile grew wide, but when he spoke all he said was, "That's great news. It means a lot to me to hear that." Impressed by his aplomb, she fixed a pointing finger and a mischievous expression on him. "But that doesn't mean you should start moving in here. It'll still be a few years before I start thinking about retirement, you hear me?" He laughed and held his hands up in surrender. "That's just fine," he said. "In fact, I'm glad to hear that too. Believe it, I'm in no hurry." She settled back, smiling proudly at his maturity. "Good. Well then, unless there's anything else, you are dismissed." But Naruto hesitated. "Actually, there is just one more thing," he began, drawing a quizzical look from the Hokage. "Several months from now Hinata will need an extended absence from duty." "The reason?" "Well," a sly look crossed his face, "let's just say I'm glad you're used to the name, Granny." A spark of recognition lit behind Tsunde's eyes. "I see. Yes, that should be simple to arrange." The future Hokage nodded his thanks and stood to leave. When he got to the door, Tsunade called after him, "Oh, and Naruto." He turned. She winked. "Congratulations, Daddy." The end. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.